Chief executives of Walmart and Target have privately warned President Trump of empty shelves in the coming week.
Did you know that sometimes what looks like a mess is actually a clever plan? That's what some people think about President Trump's tariffs. Imagine you're playing chess, and your opponent keeps making moves that seem random. But later, you realize they were setting a trap all along. When President Trump started putting extra taxes on things we buy from other countries, many people thought he was just being impulsive. News reporters called it chaos and trade wars. They showed pictures of worried farmers and factory workers. From 2018 to 2020, Trump put tariffs on steel, aluminum, solar panels, washing machines, and thousands of products from China. The stock market went up and down like a roller coaster. Other countries got upset and put tariffs on American products too. But what if there was actually a plan behind all this confusion? What if President Trump was using the tariffs to achieve specific goals? In this video, we're going to explore how what seemed like random economic decisions might have actually been strategic moves on a global chessboard. Whether you think tariffs are good or bad, you'll learn about the possible thinking behind them. When the U.S. first imposed sweeping tariffs on imports in early April, financial markets responded with immediate alarm. Global stock prices tumbled, and U.S. futures signaled deeper losses ahead, clear signs investors feared a prolonged trade standoff with Beijing. A Reuters poll of economists left no room for doubt. 100% agreed the tariffs would damage business confidence, and nearly half warned the impact could be very negative. Their forecast reflected that fear. Next year's projected growth was slashed from 2.2% to just 1.4%. This wasn't just speculation. Analysts explained that tariffs would raise the cost of raw materials, squeezing company profit margins across key sectors. To protect earnings, many manufacturers were expected to pass those costs onto consumers, setting the stage for stagflation, a toxic mix of slow growth and rising prices. Each time the White House hinted at easing or exempting certain goods, markets briefly rallied, only to plunge again within a day. That volatility revealed a deeper truth. Investors didn't trust the policy's direction, and the lack of consistency only amplified fears that the economic fallout had just begun. Economists cite the Ricardian principle. Taxing imports reduces consumer choices and wastes resources, typically costing more than it helps protected industries. The Hoover Institution notes that once tariffs are imposed, they rarely come off. They often become long-term barriers that limit the growth of new businesses. This concern is not new. Adam Smith and David Ricardo argued that free trade allows countries to specialize, improve efficiency, and lower prices. Protectionism, they warned, often leads to trade wars and reduced innovation. Governments responded swiftly. The Associated Press reported that Europe, Canada, and China threatened retaliatory tariffs. The EU warned of strong countermeasures if U.S. duties stayed in place. In response, several countries sought exemptions. Diplomats cautioned that unilateral U.S. actions risked undermining decades of rules built through the World Trade Organization. Markets reacted immediately. After the tariff announcement in early April, the Dow Jones and S&P 500 dropped. A short rally followed rumors of a possible delay, adding nearly $2 trillion in market value. But within a day, stocks fell again, signaling investor uncertainty. Economists pointed to longer-term risks. Higher costs for steel, aluminum, and other goods would reduce company profits, leading firms to raise prices. This triggered concerns about stagflation, slow growth paired with rising prices, not seen since the 1970s. Fitch Ratings estimated the tariffs could raise inflation by 2 percentage points in 2025, restricting the Federal Reserve's ability to act. Critics argued that tariffs often cause more harm than good. By raising the cost of imports, they reduce consumer choice and create inefficiencies across the economy, what economists call deadweight losses. Nearly 900 economists, including 2 Nobel laureates, criticized the policy as without basis in economic reality, warning it could trigger a recession and raise costs for American workers. Shifting goals, from reducing the trade deficit to creating jobs, only added confusion and turned short-term measures into long-term obstacles to innovation. Global reaction was swift. On April 3rd, the European Union threatened €26 billion in retaliatory tariffs on goods like motorcycles and frozen fruit if U.S. steel and aluminum duties remained. Canada, China, and others followed with their own tariff plans to protect domestic industries. China's ambassador to Washington compared the situation to the Smoot-Hawley tariffs of 1930, warning that Beijing would fight back if duties continued. Despite the turmoil, there was a strategy. Tariffs were used as leverage to push trading partners to lower their own barriers and reduce America's trade deficit. National security tariffs targeted key sectors such as steel, aluminum, semiconductors, and critical minerals. Tariffs on China also addressed concerns over intellectual property theft and state-backed industrial policies, helping to pressure Beijing into signing the Phase 1 trade deal. More broadly, these actions aim to reduce U.S. reliance on foreign supply chains and separate from strategic competitors. Trump framed his approach as reciprocal, using the threat of tariffs to gain an advantage in negotiations. This tactic played a central role in the USMCA talks, where early signals that the U.S. might exit NAFTA gave it bargaining power. As a result, Mexico and Canada agreed to major changes, including expanded U.S. access to Canada's dairy market and updated rules for resolving trade disputes. The same thing happened with Japan. When the U.S. floated a 24% tariff on auto imports, Japan suggested relaxing some of its strict safety rules on American cars in exchange for avoiding those duties. This showed that even just the threat of tariffs could be enough to break through old barriers in trade. One of Trump's biggest arguments for tariffs was the large U.S. trade deficit, about $1.2 trillion in goods. He believed this gap hurt American workers and was a result of unfair trade deals over many years. Even though almost 900 economists, including Nobel Prize winners, strongly disagreed and said the plan made no economic sense, Trump insisted that tariffs were necessary to fix these imbalances. His team believed that while tariffs might raise prices for consumers in the short term, the long-term harm caused by massive trade deficits was a bigger problem that needed urgent action. Trump didn't stop with broad tariffs. His administration also used a rule called Section 232. This rule allows trade actions based on national security, not just economics. For instance, the government started investigating industries like pharmaceuticals and semiconductors. These sectors are critical to healthcare and technology. Officials wanted to see if America was relying too much on foreign suppliers. In mid-April, Trump also ordered a fast-track review of all critical mineral imports. He pointed out that China controlled 30 of the 50 minerals the U.S. considered vital, which he said left the country dangerously exposed. In short, Trump used tariffs not only to rebalance trade, but also to protect key industries and reduce America's dependence on global rivals like China. Whether you agree with the strategy or not, the goal was clear: reshape global trade so that the U.S. had more control and a stronger position. Trump's 2018 Section 301 investigation became a major turning point in how the U.S. approached trade with China. The investigation, led by the U.S. Trade Representative USTR, found that China was breaking the rules in several serious ways, like forcing American companies to hand over their technology, stealing intellectual property, and using heavy government subsidies to give its industries an unfair advantage. Based on these findings, the Trump administration argued that tariffs weren't just about money. They were a response to China's unfair and illegal behavior under global trade rules. One of the biggest targets was China's high-tech industrial plan, known as Made in China 2025. This initiative aimed to make China a global leader in key industries like robotics, aerospace, and biotechnology. U.S. officials believed the Chinese government was using shady tactics, like manipulating its government contracts and handing out huge subsidies, to boost these industries at the expense of competitors around the world. The U.S. didn't stop at just raising tariffs. It also investigated specific sectors like shipbuilding and rare earth minerals, industries seen as crucial for both economic strength and national security. These investigations showed how deeply China's government was involved in supporting certain industries, helping justify the U.S. decision to hit those areas with steep tariffs. In a bold move, U.S. officials tried to go even further by convincing over 70 other countries to stop letting Chinese goods sneak through their ports as re-exports. a tactic China used to dodge tariffs. This showed that the Trump administration wasn't just going after China alone. It was trying to build a global coalition to push back against what it saw as China's unfair rise in the global economy. In short, Trump's tariffs on China were more than a trade fight. They were part of a bigger strategy to confront China's growing power and protect American innovation and industry. When the Phase 1 trade deal was signed in January 2020, it marked a temporary truce in the U.S. China tariff battle. The agreement stopped the cycle of back-and-forth tariff increases and included a major promise from China to buy an extra $200 billion worth of American goods over 2 years. But this deal didn't come out of nowhere. It followed months of rising pressure, as the Trump administration continually threatened more tariffs if China didn't come to the table. Even after the agreement was signed, the U.S. made it clear that if China didn't meet its buying promises, more tariffs could come back at any time. This kept the pressure on and showed that tariffs weren't just a one-time move. They were being used as a long-term tool to hold China accountable and make sure the deal was enforced. The COVID-19 pandemic and growing global tensions revealed a major weakness in America's supply chain. The country was heavily dependent on foreign suppliers for essential goods like medicine, computer chips, and critical minerals. In response, the Trump administration restarted investigations under Section 232, typically used for national security concerns, targeting pharmaceuticals and semiconductors. Critical materials like cobalt, nickel, and rare earths, many of which are controlled by China, were also put under review. These aren't just economic resources. They're key ingredients in everything from smartphones to military equipment. That's why tariffs on these products were framed not just as economic policy, but as a national security issue. Officials warned that if foreign supplies were suddenly cut off, it could weaken America's defense systems and technological edge. This tariff strategy fit into a broader push to decouple from China, reducing economic ties and rethinking global trade through a geopolitical lens. While some experts caution this could lead to a divided world economy, Trump's team argued it was necessary for U.S. independence and global leverage. On the home front, tariffs also served political goals. They appealed to voters in manufacturing-heavy states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, key battlegrounds in elections. Trump's promise to bring back steel jobs struck a chord, especially in regions hit hard by factory closures. Some small business owners like Drew Greenblatt of Marlin Steel praised the tariffs, saying they made it possible to compete with foreign companies and expand U.S. jobs. Investors also showed cautious optimism. Financial analysts like John Stoltzfus of Oppenheimer believed the steel and aluminum tariffs could encourage American companies to bring manufacturing back home, advising people to invest early in the trend. In short, Trump's tariffs weren't just about trade. They were about national security, political strategy, and reshaping America's role in the global economy. During his 2016 transition into office, Donald Trump made it clear that tariffs would be a key part of his trade strategy. His team floated the idea of a baseline 10% tariff on all imported goods, a bold signal that protecting American industries would be front and center in his administration. Throughout his presidency and beyond, Trump repeatedly framed tariffs as a way to deliver on campaign promises. He positioned them as tools to fix what he called decades of unfair trade and to protect American workers. This message was echoed when he signed a new executive order in April 2025 that pushed forward the idea of reciprocal tariffs, a system where countries that tax U.S. exports would face equal taxes in return. This approach marked a major shift for the Republican Party. Since the 1980s, the GOP had largely supported free trade. But under Trump, the party began leaning toward protectionism, especially as many working-class voters at his rallies demanded tougher trade and immigration policies. These voters wanted stronger defenses against what they saw as threats to American jobs and industries. Still, not everyone in the Republican Party was on board. Some top GOP senators, like Lisa Murkowski and Mitch McConnell, co-sponsored bills to limit the president's ability to impose tariffs without congressional approval. They were concerned about executive overreach and the long-term effects of economic nationalism. Meanwhile, nearly 900 economists, including Nobel Prize winners, signed an open letter criticizing Trump's tariff policies. They argued that reciprocal tariffs had no solid economic basis and could do more harm than good. This wave of criticism helped inspire efforts in Congress, often from within Trump's own party, to rein in presidential power over trade decisions. A White House annex showed that many major U.S. trade partners, China, Germany, and Japan, faced new tariffs added to existing trade deficits. China had the largest deficit, totaling $370 billion under the new rates. March 2025 trade data from the U.S. Census is still pending. However, early U.S. Treasury reports showed a slight narrowing of the trade deficit. This was mostly due to reduced imports. Some countries like Indonesia also increased their purchases of U.S. goods, likely to avoid new tariffs. Inside the U.S., the impact on manufacturing was mixed. The Institute for Supply Management reported a slowdown in factory activity. New orders dropped to their lowest level since 2023. Manufacturing jobs also declined. In March, thousands of jobs were lost. Companies like Volvo announced layoffs, blaming supply chain problems caused by tariffs. Other countries adjusted their trade strategies. Indonesia promised to buy more American products and cut reliance on other suppliers. China's ambassador called for an end to the trade war and warned of retaliation if tariffs stayed. In mid-April, the White House signaled that some tariffs might be paused to restart trade talks, especially as part of a Phase 2 deal. Overall, the tariff plan had mixed results. There were some early wins, like a small drop in the trade deficit and new purchase promises from other countries. But the tariffs also raised costs for businesses and consumers, added to inflation, and disrupted global trade systems. Tariffs did help lead to China signing the Phase 1 deal. That deal included a $200 billion promise to buy U.S. goods. But after that, gains were limited. Studies by Brookings and the IMF showed most of the tariff costs were paid by Americans, not foreign firms. The tariffs also didn't significantly boost national security or revive U.S. industries. The bigger impact was political. Trump's use of tariffs changed U.S. trade policy. Broad tariffs, once a last resort, became a common tool. Within the Republican Party, support shifted from free trade to protectionism and industrial policy. This shift is likely to shape future trade strategies.